we predict that there's going to be a major biometric hack that shows the weaknesses in single-factor authentication. So these days, biometrics are being used more and more, not as a second factor, but as a single factor for authenticating into your phone or your laptop or your tablet, where instead of entering a PIN, now I just use my thumb. Or instead of logging into my computer, I'd show it my face.
And by the way, the top operating systems, I mean, most users probably are Windows users. Yep. And Windows Hello is all about them moving from passwords as the primary mechanism. By the way, the password still exists, so it's still there. But they're starting to move to biometrics, whether it's a Connect-like camera that's starting to be added to laptops for your face, whether it's Touch ID, whether it's just that open Hello standard that other biometric vendors can move to. But my biggest worry here is we all know why this is happening. We've been seeing the quote-unquote death of the password. I think death is too hard, but we're seeing the weakness of passwords. And we're also seeing that human psychology and human nature means that passwords can never be as perfect as, passwords could be a good authentication token, but humans don't use them right. And even if you are using them perfectly right, they can still occasionally be hacked. But rather than starting to do multi-factor, what I see happening in the industry is everyone is just saying, okay, fine, passwords are dead. Biometrics, they're so easy. You just look at it, you get on. That's the way to go. Let's just go biometrics. We'll be secure. We won't have the password problem anymore. Yay. But that's not the case. I mean, we've seen biometrics hacked a lot. I mean, you probably...
Gummy bears, even.
Yeah. I mean, guys melting down gummy bears to replicate fingerprints. Getting fingerprint tends to sometimes take physical access. But if you think about the OPM hack, do you remember that one? That's when allegedly Russia, nation-state actors got some data from U.S. government, and many intelligence officers have their fingerprints on file. They actually stole a bunch of fingerprints. So
without cutting off their fingers?
Without even having physical access to a glass they touched, without doing dumpster diving or the other techniques you need. So biometrics aren't perfect. And the other weakness in biometrics is if you lose your fingerprints, what do you use now? I guess you burn off your fingers, you get someone to etch a new design.
Oh, lose like someone steals them, not like lose they fell off.
If the OPM, if you had your 10 fingerprints on file and they're all gone, is that an effective factor anymore? Anyways, what we're really building up to is there's nothing wrong with biometrics. I actually like them. I use them daily, but they've been cracked. Even the toughest ones like Face ID on the iPhone, which is actually technically a pretty smart way to do face scanning that's not just 2D. It was cracked by Chinese researchers, I think, like a couple weeks after it came out. So I'm worried that we're over-relying on biometrics as a single factor when what I think we both agree is multi-factor is the way to go.
Yeah. So something you have, whether it be your fingerprint or your face, and then some other factor, like a password or a token pushed to your smartphone.
It's something you have, which is usually a token. Something you are is the biometric, and something you know. Don't care what your factors are. If usability is your thing and you think passwords aren't usable, use a biometric and then use maybe mobile device DNA, something about the hardware that you have as a second factor. You can combine factors in tons of different ways. And while we're talking about it, in the prediction, we're picking on biometrics because that seems to be where the industry is going. But the same is true of like a hardware token. That can be physically stolen. A certificate, there's the PKI infrastructure that manages it, but once people hack into that, they can steal all your certificates. There's never going to be a factor that's a 100% effective. So I really think what we should focus on is combining them, not just picking one factor we think will be a panacea when it won't.
Yeah. And at WatchGuard, we've got Auth as our multi-factor solution, which does use both biometrics and tokens and mobile DNA as we described.
Yep, passwords, and it does a lot of cool things that make it even harder, where if you try to image a phone, there are ways to actually sometimes get quote unquote hardware factors if it's a more soft factor by imaging something, the software running on that thing. But we do a lot of tricks so that even if you imaged it and ran it in a virtualization system, it's not going to have the same DNA.
Yeah. So our defensive tips, I feel like we hit them, but really just don't rely on a single factor.
As biometrics roll out and more people push them, one, feel free to use them. They really do help with usability, but realize that a biometric by itself is still a single factor and try to combine more than one of them.
Yep.